Recording and everything's unmuted.
Yes. In the microphone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Gotta read this in, but I gotta tweak. Well, the Health Licensing Office Community Engagement for Cosmetology Fields of Practice is convening at 126 on 6/13. This meeting is being held by MS Teams. Video conference and being recorded. Recording will be posted to the internet for public viewing. Licensing office asks individuals attending for MS Teams, keep their phone muted, the cameras off during scratch that. But they raise their hand when they want to engage. So, and I made a question. Feedback, nothing else. What's this meeting? Okay, so, we're here, I guess we can definitely open the floor if you want to talk more about conversations that go on the last few days. I can start with some of the things in licensing. Really, this is our first community meeting session, so you know as much as I do. Literally. So it's up to you guys, how you want this to go. You can just start. Yeah, they turn all of your licenses. Okay, so then this is really just trying to get a feeling for, so background, that Oregon Health Authority has tasked all of its programs, offices, whatever they want to call centers, of doing community engagement before starting. So outside of a RAC, outside of a board meeting, so something before that. And so, and they're really pushing that. And in order to do anything else, like, for instance, if you wanted to make a RAC exception to not have one, you had to do prior community engagement. So we're trying it out, seeing how it goes, how it wins. But I think it gives me a good idea of how to go, as the analyst and the rule writer, what way we should start. Yeah. And what things are a bad idea, what are a good idea. So I'm just gonna start with the first thing on the list, which is, freelance examination. So currently, let's see, so currently, it's, you have to every 3 years, when you first come in, you have to last one. You know, we'll chime in anytime. And then every 3 years, you have to read. So, Bob, sure, okay.
So every 3 years, somebody has to take an exam. Well, about 2 years ago, I asked if we could have it for every 5 years. And so it got changed every 3 years. But in the meantime, these individuals, a lot of them still work in facilities, still are independent contractors, and do freelancing on the side for weddings and different occasions. So I would like to see where these individuals don't have to come in and take the full laws and rules exam of 90 questions or 100 questions, 100 questions, 90, okay, 90 questions every 3 years. To simplify it by having an examination that pertains to freelance, like for 25 questions, and have it be on our work day. So that way individuals could get a certificate once they pass that, and they wouldn't have to come into our office to sit for the exam. It would be a lot easier for renewals, really easy for renewals, because they could self-attest that they had done it. Those certificates could be sent in to us, or I think we have a way to see if these individuals did it, but they can self-attest that they did take the exam and they can renew online. Right now, they can't renew online. They can the first time, the second time, but that creates problems for our IT to be able to keep track of all those renewals of who can renew online and who can't renew online. So I would like to see a simpler process for individuals that are freelance, to be able to take an exam. And one of the things, there's practitioners out there that don't practice for years and years and years. They don't, and they keep renewing their licenses. They don't have to come back in and take a 90-question exam to get their license back. We don't know if they are working. So that would be an example as to why I would like to see it go to a 25-question exam online and let them do it that way from them.
How often would they take that exam?
Well, that would be up to the board to determine, 3 years, 5 years.
That's kind of what you're thinking about 3-5-year
Yeah.
rankings. I think it makes a lot more sense. I think that really we should always be looking toward the future in terms of technology. So things like online renewal, things like that, the more streamlined it can be, the faster it is, I think, for all of you. Right? I mean, that's really important. You guys have a lot to do anyway. And then obviously practitioners can have a lot to do. Driving all the way into Salem and things like that can be very, very difficult, especially if they're far away. And typically, I mean, like I'm a license holder as a real estate agent as well. Like I know what it's like to have other licenses. And it's not super common. Like I never have to go back and take the law again. I took it one time, and as long as I maintain my license, I have continued education credits. Obviously, as a basic, we don't have that rule. We have it for advanced. But as long as I keep those up and I keep my license, paid and up to date, then and active, I never have to do that again. And I would say law-wise, it's a lot stickier as a real estate agent, even as an esthetician in a lot of ways. So it makes complete sense. I completely agree, because I think it's going to be more streamlining. It's going to be better for the child. It's going to be better for the practitioners. And it's not necessary if you keep it. It doesn't matter if you're working. I don't do many real estate transactions, right? But I hold my license and keep it active, and I do my practice that I need to do. And that's funny. And I would be able to do those at home. So every 2 years I have to do those, and I'm able to do this at home. And I think it does translate in the sense it's still a licensed program. And you've already gone through the test. You're actually a licensed esthetician. You should be knowing your laws anyway. That's part of being an active license holder. And that is a requirement. You should be up to date with your licensing and what's going on. Yeah, I agree with that. I would say 5 years, personally.
Well, and I think it's important to note that an examination of obtaining freelance authorization is not a requirement. It's something that the board, before I worked here, when I started in enforcement, every month, people who had to renew in that month came in your office. It means you do the case. Yep. We've done it lots of different ways, but that is not by no means required. Kind of mantra has always been that you don't get an inspection for your freelance authorization holder. So that's we want to make sure you study your laws and rules because you don't get an inspection. So there's also that going with having it all.
Yeah, having an exam at all. That's
I don't personally think it's scary because I think as a license holder, if you're active, if you let things lapse, I think that there's a lot of things you usually have to redo. I mean, that's what you have to do anytime you let a license lapse. But if you're paying your fees and you're doing kind of the normal whatever's required, I don't think any examination is required. I mean, even if you're a facility holder, just to renew my facility, you guys don't come in and check my stuff. Like, you kind of assume that I'm like doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's only complaint based, right? I mean, a freelance is the same thing. They just happen to have their business on wheels. It's still not a different thing.
Well, and a lot of those licensees have independent contractors licenses and their facilities already.
Right.
So it's a double-edged sword. A lot of them are getting inspected, and they're still having to take an exam just to hold their additional license. And somebody had brought up at the school association meeting that there's states that don't even require you to have a freelance license to go to other, go into people's homes and weddings, any of that.
I was just gonna say, when I was a police officer, you get your certification, you never went back and tested for anything. It was all continuing education.
Yeah.
So you have to keep on top of that. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm doing my private investigator license. There's an initial test. After you apply, it's an open book test. They literally, you can't cheat on it. It's just way to see if you know how to look up the laws and rules. If you pass it after that, no more testing. So I guess my point is there's a lot of professions.
But you don't do it over and over again. like-
No, you do nothing over. They just, and if they audit you, they audit you. But other than that, there's no.
And your driver's license, you take your exam one time,
Yeah,
you never have to go back.
And then you could not drive for years. My mother had MS and she renewed it for some years. She was not driving the last year. So, I mean, but she had her license.
Sammy has an idea.
Gather your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. You can require financial education.
That was gonna be my thought.
Yeah.
What was that?
Establishing a continuing education requirements for renewal and authorization. The office determines that continuing education is appropriate for.
So we could
You
have
can do freelance as
So-
continuing education. Yes.
someone coming in to renew the freelance can attest.
Just anybody else?
So having to provide us the information unless we requested an audit. Attest to taking,
Continuing.
continuing.
so like you would keep, like they would take an individual log and like say, I spent such time.
Doing lots of roles, or they could attest that they did, read the lots of roles.
Yeah, but we did continuing education, there'd be a little work that we have to do.
Right.
I don't think it would be.
Don't need to have pages.
And then domains, so just do that's in, but, but that would be a really.
And continuing education and a license, realm is very normal, as we said. That is very common. And they want you to continually be on top of your field. They're saying that you're a professional, so it's not that crazy fast. That's surprised me.
What about during that, when they attest, could they also check a box that they are giving each client a copy of the HLO contact information like they're supposed to? And their business card has their certificate number and that type of thing? Because I think that's the stuff that's how that's how we're protecting the public. So if there is a problem, they have a way to reach out to you all and file a complaint. So I think that would be very easy to add on to that form if you are having them attest.
I personally wouldn't, only because it's just one more thing that they're supposed to be doing, and if they get in trouble, if they're not, like, if you're a contractor, if you're a real estate agent, they don't come and check me every year if I'm like giving my disclosure. I have to, every time I speak to the client, I have to submit a disclosure of agency. Okay, and if they find out I didn't, that's where I get in trouble.
You have to, the holder of the freelance authorization must provide each client.
Yeah, so isn't that their role? And if they're not, that's when investigations happen versus making you guys do one more step, which are the idea of like as licensed people, they're supposed to be doing what's in the law, in their rules. And you checking them like a baby every year doesn't make any sense. It's just a lot of extra work. They're supposed to be.
Their business card's supposed to have all the information on the front and
Yeah,
back.
and just, it is in real estate too. You're supposed to have your number, you have to have your agency, there's lots of rules about advertising, right? And who to contact, all this stuff. So it's not that different in any other licensing field. But nobody checks me until there's a complaint. Then I get checked. And I think that's why the complaints are set up, so we can filter through, because what are you guys supposed to do? Check every single person in the door like that? Like, it's too much work for something they're supposed to be doing, and we have an investigation process in place to remedy those situations. I mean, that's just my.
We do have investigation protocol, we do the investigations. And I can't tell you off the top of my head how many of those involve freelance, but I don't think it's very many. So I'm completely on board. Tina and I have discussed this multiple times. You know, because again, I'm a former police officer, correctional officer, had to have DPSSD, got my license one time for authorization, and then you continue it all the time.
Right.
So I'm on board with it. And then earlier, 2 months prior to this, the discussion about testing and all that, we're moving more towards workday with some of ours. Tests. And, after this legislative session, we're gonna be looking at putting our tests out in the cloud, so folks can test it, because our office is limited, size is limited, space, and licensees, it just, how many are we doing now? 40 a day sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes up to 50 to 60 exams a day. So I mean, that's 40 for individuals coming in, testing that could be taking 1 to 4 exams per day. And we are busy. Very.
So we hear what you're saying, and it's something that's been said for a number of years. And so we're moving it as we continue to grow. We're on our 18th program. So
You really do have to figure out something with our license of the line.
Sure.
Especially with technology, I mean, that's what it's made for, and in fact, that just makes everybody not so overworked. They can focus on things that need to be done. I mean, really, there's only so much capacity right at the office, so,
and we're driven by laws and rules,
sure.
and we're not going to violate that. We have Heather to keep us in line. Yeah, we're not going to do anything to violate the statutes, but statutes can change. Just can do that.
Well, I think a lot of things have been set up to in the past that they didn't encompass the abilities that technology provided to us. And so everything is done in person and a lot of like double checking and things. And so I think, yeah, that's kind of part of it. It's just like what we're doing with the device thing, right? It's like as technology moves forward, we have to start talking about new things and how are the laws going to now encompass those new things. I think the same way it's just really in the testing and the way that we deal with all of our licensees and things like that, that we have to start figuring out what areas. I think it's really, really important long term, because then you can do more. You can do more if you're not doing all of those.
So that I'm clear, you are saying that you are trying to move where the students would not have, the graduates would not have to come up to Salem if it's.
So we will start that with our small boards first. And then eventually move, and we've even talked about, some of the schools having a testing room, because it will be able, if you're on a screen, they've got, what's it called? They've got mechanisms in place that if somebody walks in, it's gonna alert you right away. It's gonna be one warning. If they see you go from one screen to another screen with a mouse, it's gonna warn you. And then I think it's like third time you're done. So, we will start with the small boards first and then move on to cosmetology eventually.
And that's kind of interesting idea of like placing even testing within the school, because that's where you go and that's where you do your initial kind of testing and things like that. You can proctor exams. I know when I did real estate, like there were several locations that they're testing proctored locations, set up with the screens, the computers, and then they're able to run a variety of tests. And that's where I went and got my real estate license. And, they had a bigger printer and the things they need to do. But I mean, schools can have that set up too, or even different testing centers. There's many testing centers that do a lot of different types of testing, and it can be distributed out in that way and it can be closer to people's homes.
So the hope is that they're able to do it at home
Yeah.
with your camera, and then again, 3/4
So
movements,
then if
you're out.
Yeah, turn the camera, someone change the picture.
Yeah.
All the way through, off and on.
So-
Nathan?
I was gonna say, I just ran some stats, since 1996, there have only been 512 complaints against ICs. That's probably the lowest, I mean, we've had more complaints just about every,
Freelance or?
I'm sorry, freelance.
That's
Oh, no, let me
nice.
look. I'm sorry, I put the wrong name. That was IC. but-
Yeah. Or so on a Freelance.
So just so you all recognize, we do recognize
Yeah.
as new blood comes through the office, there are better ways to do things.
Yeah.
And,
Two.
like technology is up on all that.
We've had 20 complaints against, freelance since 1997, only 20 complaints.
So right, and you're looking at those numbers, you're like, why are we triple checking these people, which is just creating more work for something that's not a problem.
Karen?
Well, I know that the cosmetology board is the most people. Why don't you start at the top instead of these little boards? We need.
Well,
big.
Yeah, and we want to test it out first. We're not real sure it's going to take a little bit of time, and because cosmetology is so big,
Yeah.
that's a huge
I know.
thing to
We
tackle.
can fix a couple of hundred tests
Yeah.
versus a couple of thousand.
Yeah.
And some of our boards have a license.
I know, I'm just begging for, I'm just begging for Medford that has.
To drive up. I
Yeah.
You guys.
There will be drive home to Ashland.
There will be some more discussion that I think you'll be happy with.
I think there might be a middle ground, is maybe testing those smaller boards. Because if you take, like a school or two schools and let them trial it, and then we know it's problematic, when we're having a more high volume.
Yeah.
I think it goes right with our classes are on lab and they're. I mean, hybrid and we've done all that tricks.
COVID, as bad as it was, has taught us
A
some
lot.
new things.
We wouldn't be where we are.
So, but yeah, and I hear what you're saying, but again, some of our boards are small, some have a license, some have a few licenses.
I know, it's just begging.
We know, we're keeping all that in mind. I mean, me and Bob have been talking about it for a while now, and then we looped Sammy in on it, and there's, I've got several ideas to change some things.
And I don't think it'll actually take all that long to get everybody on. Because it's a private company doing it that already does it. And it's a matter of contracting, getting the right computer equipment in and testing and see how it works, make sure it works first.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
DMV is doing it.
Yeah, DMV.
DMV already started, they launched last year. Sammy's taking some notes.
Can I bring up that obviously their item writing has not met in over a decade, if I'm not mistaken.
Since, I think right after I left, probably following year. Let's repeat it. 18. Look. It was either 18 or 19. Yeah, with the schools. Not with the schools, she did when she.
Yeah, she did.
We haven't
We haven't had an item writing since like 2013.
Yes.
Yeah. So decade.
Yes.
And I think my concern is that, there are already textbooks that have been coming out that the schools are trying to make decisions about. And the textbooks that are listed on the bulletin, the, exam information bulletin are from, some of them are 2007 books. So I mean, I think that's the other things, we need to be able to know what's coming up so we can make wise business decisions.
Right. And me and Bob have also talked about that.
Does anybody ever review the, for example, the barbering? Does anybody ever go down, when I was on Bud Paulson's testing site, testing, when we were on the item writing committee about 40 years ago. We had to go write a question and then it was put out. And then that question was verified that if more than one person, more than a percentage of the people flunked it, we had to go back to that question and either rewrite it or throw it out. So has anybody ever reviewed, number one, the barbering, that everybody has trouble passing? We can't understand why they're missing. Is it the verbiage? Is it the way it's written? Is it? We don't know. We can teach.
It hasn't happened, but there is a couple of exams that we have went in. And, for example, I just had Carrie Full tattoo, exam, find out, how many questions were on tattoo guns. And how many passed and failed them. So that does need to happen on all of our exams. We're trying to get there, but barbering would be, and me and Bob talked about this, barbering would be the exam that we start with.
11 years I've been here, it's always been a topic at a lot
Yes.
of board meetings. Why is that number the way it is? I don't have an answer.
I don't think.
But we will get an answer.
I don't think that you have to do it. I think you could call a committee to do that for you. I mean, I'm already committing.
We have a way to pull that information from solutions, and it will tell us the questions that are the most failed. So we have the capability to do that, and then have an item writing committee for you to come in and look at those questions that have been missed over and over.
Pass fail rate for aesthetics and hair is not very good either.
Right.
I mean, so it's,
Well, it might be affected by the books that
Yeah.
we're trying to.
it's more than barbering now. It's, their aesthetics is like half a fail.
I can tell you, me being from the study reviews, and Brandon can probably second this, that aesthetics is probably the number one study review that I do. Number one, hands down. I honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, it's not a lot of the same questions. We have questions in regards to subjects. And I find it's a lot of the same subjects, I guess you could say, that people are missing, so. But yeah, aesthetics is number one.
It's not.
Send me some time.
No, because I've been working on this for the last month.
Yeah.
Just as like, just a person in the school, your arena. It is my understanding that some schools still teach their aesthetics from the aesthetics chapter out of their full COS book, not the aesthetics textbook. And there is a lot more information in a full aesthetics textbook than there is the one chapter housed in the cosmetology textbook. Because the questions are taken out of the aesthetics book, right? Not out of the chapter, not out of the full COS book. It's taken out of the aesthetics book.
Do you think it would be helpful to send them something? There's several things I need to go to, what we talked about with that.
A gentle reminder that there's an entire textbook. I mean, Oregon, I know a lot of other states are leaning in the same direction as Oregon now with having separate licenses for all of these different scopes of practice, but back in my day, right, you had, in Texas, it was a cosmetology license. It was everything. And so it was your nails information and your aesthetics information was nowhere near as detailed as the information that we have now. And I think it's great where we are now, but there's a huge world of difference between studying one chapter on how to do a basic facial and having an entire textbook that's dedicated to anatomy and physiology, chemistry, machines, devices, specific to the aesthetics scope of practice and not just for an entire cosmetology.
Yeah, I'm just making notes.
Okay, so that brings me on to the next topic, which would be reciprocity. For individuals that are coming from another state. So years ago, we used to have true reciprocity for individuals coming in from another state. And then we went from true reciprocity to the Lawson rules exam. And then we found that there was some cheating happening and stuff. We didn't realize that some states didn't really actually have, and for example, Florida has a kind of like a conditional license. It's not a full license until you test, but you can get this provisional license to practice. So we had all of a sudden all these nail techs stuff that had came into Oregon. And once we realized that that had happened, all of them we had to change our process, and we went back to having everybody take all this. So, but we've been talking about a lot lately is reciprocity within states. Why should we make somebody come back in that's been practicing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and have to move to Oregon because of things that have happened in life? And why should they have to come in and take all those exams all over again. Why not just have them take the laws and rules exam coming in from another state?
You don't have that cheating.
Yeah.
You know who's like.
Yeah, you know.
So those problems have been solved.
Yeah.
So now we're not realizing, but now that we know what each state is doing.
Yes.
But I also look at the fact that we're talking about other states that have a cosmetology license, and then they come into Oregon and we have a higher standard for what an esthetician can do, or.
But we're not talking about advanced aesthetics.
Right.
They're a different board, but there is only, I think, which we would have to, before we even did any of this, we would have to look at the states because, for example, Alaska is 7th vertebrae. That's another whole,
That's
another
where I
question
was
we're
going.
going to get to. So, but there's just a handful. There's a lot of states that now that we've even dropped our hours down, where there's states that are higher than us. We used to be the highest in the US and now we're pretty much same as a lot of the states are.
So if that state is substantially equivalent to, then we're good.
Correct.
And they could go ahead and
Correct.
just take Oregon law.
Yes. Okay. Yes. If somebody comes in from Alaska, let's just use them right now. And they have only learned the 7th vertebrae and they have to go to a school in Oregon and they have to take, they have to be assessed. And they would have to be evaluated on their transcripts from their state. And then they would be evaluated and then do a skills assessment and a practical. If they have more that they need to be taught, as you guys know, as school learners and instructors, then you have to enroll in your school. Then you would have to do the rest of it.
If the school chooses to.
Correct.
What is the 7th vertebrae? What does that mean?
Just, it's.
Technology.
Yeah, information technology.
Oh,
It's
is that
the only 7th vertebrae.
In 2005, for that, Oregon was the 7th vertebrae.
Yes.
And then change that to full body skincare. And the story goes, skin is skin is skin, whether it's the face, or this or the that. And that obviously some of this goes to expertise advice. So some of, that's why we're engaging. We want to find out all of these things. But yeah, that's historically, that's the reason that the legislature bought into it. Skin and skin, whether it's on your décolleté or on.
And we're starting to learn more and more as some of these individuals are coming in and we tell them, no, you have to go through a non-credentialed process, which means to go to a school with your transcripts. We're finding out that there could be only 2 or 3 states that only do 7th vertebrae and that because they have learned additional things either in school or after. So it would just be something we'd have to look into.
I think that's a great idea.
I just give them reciprocity and charge them $500 for their first thing.
We charge you more, and you can say.
State.
Yeah, Oregon law, charge them charge them for reciprocity and let them in. The public is going to take care of anything.
And reciprocity already coming in from another state, if you're taking everything, it is like $800 and something.
Right, and then they gotta go to school and they gotta, and if you listen to the salon owners who don't have any help.
And
We've
that's
got
what
to
we're
make-
hearing a lot.
Gotta make it easier for people to get their license.
And instructors, we have a lot of instructors. I don't know what's going on, but it seems like an increase of instructors coming from other states right now.
That would
And I
be
think
nice.
that's again. So,
That would be
and they
wonderful.
have to jump through all these hoops
Yes.
in order to be able to teach and then they've been practicing for 20 plus years and they have to come in and retest. Well, they fail because, it's been a long time, since.
Well, we would hire 10 today,
Yeah.
right now today.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we follow the rules about how many students per instructor. We can't we can't enroll students unless we have instructors to cover that. And on top of that, you're not going to get any more people taking your board to make enough money to pay your debt. You know, I mean, it's a big circle, I know. But I don't know if the reality comes along that, I mean, we have to limit our enrollment today because we don't have enough educators to educate according to the lines. But we have to, do you know that?
If not,
Something's got to open up so these people can get the word.
And a lot of other states, and this is what we hear every single day. I mean, my staff take a brunt in a lot of hostility when people of reciprocity are coming at. And, you know, they get screamed at and fussed at and yelled at because we're one of the few states that charge the amount that we charge coming in, but not only that, that they have to test. A lot of states now, you don't have to test it. You can come through reciprocity, take their laws and rules. Some don't even have to do that. Washington, you don't have to do that now. And I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that. Washington's changed and they've got true reciprocity.
You're right, so the deputy found it.
Yeah, I think it's been since I was.
Started October 1st, 2012. The last meeting was March 1st, 2014, so it took a while. Which stands to reasons.
I mean, I think there's, you know, cause to be mindful as what we're requiring students to know. And then just doling out reciprocity to anybody who's taken whatever courses in whatever other state. Reflecting back to what I said earlier, when I was in Texas, I got my full COS license that actually had me qualified to take every single license here. Hair, skin, nails, and barbering. I don't know 2 cents, didn't know 2 cents about the barbering program. And to know that I was allowed to take that test and to practice barbering. I would be mindful of what we're allowing people to get strict reciprocity in.
Oh, yeah.
And aesthetics specifically, right, knowing like what I learned in school, and granted, it was 30 years ago, so I know things have changed anyway, but I can come back in and take that test. Right, and I passed it first time, so it's not like we're asking people to go above and beyond what we're asking everyone else to know.
Right.
So I just think that like being mindful that like just doling out reciprocity doesn't seem quite fair to people who are being required to take X number of hours, a certain number of services in the state that we're in.
Well, and that falls back. I mean, we have reciprocity right now. For, I think there's only 5 states that we don't have reciprocity with as far as some of their disciplines go. But the rest of them are all reciprocity. They have equal or more hours.
Right.
Even before, we had 2,300 hours here and we were taking people down. We had 240 hours, you know, in some of the disciplines coming in and testing. So, I mean, it would be something that would be looked at. As far as we already have a breakdown that my staff go by when it comes to reciprocity, whether they can or cannot come in. And then some of them have to go to a school.
And I don't want to be like, no one gets reciprocity. I'm just like, equally, are we requiring our people that live here and do in current schools to, we're probably requiring more of them than requiring.
I think the difference is, then you, the way you say that.
And another thing, we have a lot of people that come to reciprocity that are licensed only. But they only come in to do 1 or 2 disciplines. They don't come in to do everything. And then, you know, we have a lot of people we tell right at that time, hey, don't let your license go in that state because in order for you ever to get licensed here, you want to keep those licenses up. We've got tons of people that come back in that have got licensed in Oregon, went to another state, let their license go here and have to come back here and test again. So we always try to remind people to keep all the licenses.
no working state to send this reason to, like trying to get other states to send information, but it's. Can't mention. Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk about study reviews and the limitation on testing, retake part. So currently right now, you take your test, you have to wait 7 days, come back on the 8th day and you can retake it. First, second time, it's that way. Third time, you have to wait 30 days before you can come and test. So to me, is that really what we're trying to do for individuals that were so close? Maybe they got, I'm just going to use that as an example. They got 73% and it's their second time. Now they have to wait 30 days before they can test again for the third time. Or no, after the third time, then they have to wait 30 days. Let's have a discussion about that because
I'm curious, I'm sure you guys have the kind of general idea of like how to find, so right, you've got like someone they're testing, say 2 times in a row, and you can see their test scores going up because it's all really compacted, and they're remembering information from a week ago, they're probably doing a lot of studying because it's like a short amount of time, and then you're probably seeing their score go up. You know, what is it looking like when they're coming back after 30 days? Are the scores all dropping, or are they staying the same? Like, is it causing them to forget information, or are they studying more? That's what I'm curious about, because if you're seeing a little bit of a decline by waiting 30 days and it's almost getting worse than worse, and then now they're testing on more and more, maybe the 30 days isn't that great because they're probably not utilizing it and they're probably forgetting the test.
so one of the things in this discussion too is we've got people like current students that come from Bend. We've got people that come from Prineville over to test, and then they fail and they've only missed it by 1. I'm just saying that. So they missed by 1, and guess what? Now they got to drive back home and they can't come for 7 days, not till 8th day to come back.
That's
So I'm wondering, you know,
to be able to test in 24 hours or the next
yeah,
day?
that's what,
Because I've seen that in other licenses.
That's
Like,
what
they'll do that for the first few, it'd be like, you can test the very next day. Or then maybe it's like 3 days or things like that.
yeah. And it used to be.
Didn't we have that before?
Historically, it used to be
We went to 7:30 initial trainings.
Yeah.
Because we had people lined up there, so we failed, I'm right back.
Oh.
Right back.
That was more of
We just lined them down the hall.
And was it making them pass better?
No, and that was all combined with, the cheating, someone test, whatever it was, it was all combined together. So it was just a big loss.
It was accommodation.
Yeah.
Because they were taking tests so frequently, others couldn't get in
Right,
that hadn't tested at all.
right, makes sense. That makes sense.
Is there room in conversation for there to be it may be a horrible idea, but for there to be a separate set of time guidelines or limitations for people that are testing at the state versus these ones that we're talking about potentially testing online or whatever. Like if you're testing online, you have to wait a day or whatever, but if you're coming into the facility, you still have to wait those 7 days. So it gives people more time to cycle through the actual testing center at the state versus, no, it's not, it's no sweat off the bus one way or the other if you're testing online, being able to do more often.
I think that would be like disparate to some,
Yeah.
are coming in versus
We
doing.
have to the same.
Consistent across.
And online is out.
Further out than we want to.
What we're finding difficult is how much staff time it's taking to do these study reviews after the 3rd time. And then having to wait 30 days to come back in. So that is one of the things there that I guess that's our main discussion too, is not having to wait the 30 days.
Yeah, and it's necessary.
Yes, it's necessary, and it's necessary to have a limitation on how many times you can test. With test anxiety, and everything, because we do have a lot of people, I mean, they'll start their exam, and get up,
Yeah.
do this. Who was it earlier was talking about the test anxiety. And, you know, even when I used to go into the schools to review practicals, I would walk in and the minute I walked through the door, people would start crying and walk right out the door and I'm like, I can't do it, I can't do it.
That was like, literally, I tell my students all the time, it was like one of the most traumatic events I ever had in my life was when I was testing. And in Texas, she went down to Austin, we did your practicals in a room with 1,000 other people. And the testing process came up to me and was like, don't you go to school and like a or whatever? And I was like, I'm 18. I was like, and she was like, yeah, I saw you the other day. And I was like, I must have been absent. I must have been absent. She just said she saw me. That's the state of panic that I was in. I was like, why are you talking to me? We're not supposed to be talking. Don't talk to me. Like, yeah. Oh, it's literally the most anxious I've ever been in my
I
entire
think that the anxiety goes a long way. I've been out as inspectors and inspector walks in and it's Eugene Ortiz, the calmest, most soft-spoken individual that goes out and does his inspections. Anyway, this gal, I mean, she just lost it. You know, it was sad, but that taught me a lot about, you know, the anxiety and, you know, how HLO staff present themselves. Well, this is how it is, too bad, you know, we don't work like that. We go out, we have conversations like we will today. Have conversations to ensure, you know, we get that anxiety down. And I get anxiety on interviews and, you know, the minute you walk out, you're like, "Ah, I knew that. I knew the answer to that question, you know, or I should have said something different." So with that being said, I'm of the opinion that, and if we can make it work, you know, there's a time if somebody takes a test, they fail it by 1 or 2%, turn around and send it back in, we can do it.
But we wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, I get that,
But-
logistically speaking, but 30 days, you know, your retention of what you're trying to remember, I think it declines. I don't mind with 10 minutes.
Well, in 30 days in our areas, like Dan's, right, you can go get a job for $22 an hour for that 30 days, and then they got you up.
Yeah.
And we don't get them into the profession, we don't get them placed. And we don't get them tested, we don't get them we don't get them licensed, we don't get them placed, and so then we fail our next business.
Yeah, you're not this.
We have to get these people in the profession.
Yeah, I think you say that even on the, you know, in reviewing when people are taking their tests, like seeing these year-long gaps between when they're taking their tests, you're right, they're probably
doing something just got burnt out because then, so you're sitting there and you're taking the test and you know that third time. And with your anxiety, if you don't pass that exam, guess what? You have to wait 30 days to come back and take that exam. Once you have to wait 30 days and you have no income coming in,
correct.
these people are gonna have to go and find another.
Or they're gonna work illegally.
Yes, they're gonna work illegally, right, because they need the money. And then another thing is, individuals that come into tests and say some of those that I, explained earlier, if they sit there and, their practical is only good for 2 years. So all that testing anxiety and stuff, then my staff have to count every single exam all the way down. And then not only that, they're looking at the 2-year mark, but they're also looking at the first day they applied. And then you've got these people that pass one of the disciplines, but don't pass the laws and rules, or vice versa. And then they hit that 2 years because of whatever reason, anxiety or whatever, then you start all over again.
And then their student loan comes.
Yeah.
At 6 months, and so they default on the student loan and ruin buying a house and a car and et cetera for the rest of their life until they get off student loan.
And Karen's right, like, she said, you know, getting them placed, especially with these new gainful employment rules that are potentially rolling out for schools. We're talking about This could cause 40 to, they say 40 to 60% of schools have been closed because of this gainful employment. And if we can't place them, we're not gonna be around, and then what happens to the industry? We no longer have service providers,
And it's serious.
very serious.
You should see our hotline emails.
I mean, no joke, I had 8 emails from different organizations being like, please write your letter, because this is going to end our industry.
I'm glad we're having that conversation.
Can you send me those?
Absolutely.
So
Please write a letter too.
Well, I mean, they're asking everybody to write letters, right? Like service providers, distributors, like anybody, because they're really, really scared it's gonna end
Well,
up.
we've had more calls in this last year from salons upset with us, trying to get somebody hired in, that I've been here 26 years. I've never seen these kind of calls that have been coming in. It's, I mean, never.
And I
You
have
know,
issues with
it's working.
people doing study reviews. That's part of their issue is I have this job lined up and I can't start until I get licensed.
Right, and now I have to wait 30 days before I can come back.
And
So-
most of the time, if they already have a job, it's longer than that 30 days because they're like, oh, I need 2 weeks notice to give my job.
So let me ask you, what is pros and cons on having to wait 30 days, before you can test again? You know, I mean,
I guess the only pros, but it's really with it's like discipline, right? It's like, okay, you're not focusing, you're wasting your time, you're coming in over and over. And it's like, in a sense, it's placing a discipline on someone that you have a time limit, like in most things in a career. Like, you usually just can't like go over and over and over again, like waste all your guys' time and never look at the book, right? It's putting that parameter and I think like boundary on people, but then of course, waiting 30 days. But you, even the 7 days, so maybe the best thing is to start with getting them closer together for those first 3 times, or first 4 times, and then way shorter, like 24 hours. And then all of a sudden, maybe you do have to do something like that, because you also don't want people literally coming in 10 days in a row and kind of messing around, because that's also reality. It's not just anxiety, it's like people not preparing.
we could do it 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then you go back to the 8th day.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, does it really matter how many times they test?
I think it matters more if they do it right in your facility, because it doesn't matter to me.
Well, they're paying each time 45
Right.
minutes.
Well, it's like you said, the problem was the line out the door and things like that. I guess it's more of just like the facility to be able to be able to do it.
So logistic issue.
Yeah, I would imagine, but no one cares any other way.
So it's my thinking from my experience doing these for the last year, basically. So yes, it would be definitely beneficial for them to do the first 2 within 24 hours. And then get up to like 2 or 3 more tries after that, like the 8th day. And then after that, we offer the study review. Because a lot of people do benefit from the study review, like a lot. I mean, I have like a 95% pass rate after the study review.
So if we eliminated how many times you can take it and just say after the 5th time testing, then you can have a study review. I think it would eliminate all this 30 days, these students having to, they might pass before then, so.
Yeah, I think we're dealing with a different type of student, a different type of learner than we've ever had before. And I think anxiety, is a huge thing, and taking some of the stipulations and rules off of it, opening it up a little more,
Yeah.
and not having to freak out about everything.
Not have all that pressure on.
I mean, I would be surprised if your testing actually goes up once you relieve some of that, people don't fail as often.
And one of the big complaints that I get from people that I do study reviews for is that well, especially like just recently because of the whole online learning thing, a lot of people didn't get it. They don't learn like that. And then they were, basically forced into that if that's what they wanted to do. So the online learning, the books online, they were never given the option for hardback books or something like that. So, or like an actual physical book. So that was also one of the big complaints that I got for the last year. was the online learning. I'm like, I'm sorry.
It's hard for everyone.
Yeah,
But it's probably going to get easier because more and more high schools are online. I mean, just that's last. And there's, but with the COVID kids, God forbid if we get them through anything.
yeah. And I mean, it's a lot of people with test anxiety and a lot of people, you know, not liking their schools. They didn't teach them enough according to them. So. Yeah.
And we don't
talk to your.
We don't believe everything we hear.
Yeah.
Look, it was rough for all of us, right?
Yeah.
Having, like, thank you, Tracy. Legitimately, you know, the second most anxious thing in my life was trying to teach these kids on, I mean, there were tears daily. Like,
Oh,
just,
yeah.
you know, being online and me begging them to engage. Like, I know it's hard, but please engage. I know it's boring to talk about anatomy and physiology while you're online, but please engage. Like, it was rough for all of us, and I just got that they definitely felt like they got a diluted version. of
Yeah, and I
the school experience.
facilitated, I changed it, the body bruising practical, and I also do the hearing aid specialist practical, which is like, what, 3.5 hours, something like that per person for the hearing aid specialist practical. They are extremely nervous when they come in. And they're like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what I'm doing. Where do I sign my name?
I mean, that's a lot of the, you know, from the school's perspective, when I'm coaching them to take their test, I'm not coaching them on the content. I'm coaching them on how to take a test. Like, you know, go in, let them know. If you have sound sensitivity, let them know. I bet they'll let you put your ear, you know, like an ear plug in or whatever. If someone's disrupting you, please let somebody know in the facility. Like, I'm coaching them on how to take a test.
We have an earplugs, it's a little cheapy plastic one for people.
Right.
Because you can't take any, you know, like.
That's what I'm saying.
Device.
Like, your things in there for you to do.
With like a box of them on the back counter.
If the questions you don't know, they'll come back around to get, like, literally how to take a test, how to take that test, right? We're reminding them of the blueprint, being like, do not study anatomy and physiology. If that's not your strong suit, don't study it. There's only X amount of questions.
I'll not bang for your buck.
Yeah. I'm studying the things that you know you're gonna get more questions on. Like, it's not the content that they're freaking out about, it's the whole
And it's the
experience.
study guides that they get from,
Sometimes that's, there's a discrepancy. How they're seeing the test when they're sitting there and they're reading the questions, because ultimately, when you take the test, it's not always how smart you are, how much knowledge you know, but it's how you understand what the test is trying to ask you. And I mean, even for me, I think I'm pretty smart. When I took the test, I was like, for me, I was like, what, yeah, could be this, it could be this, and you're playing this, like, you know, okay, I'm gonna say definitely no on this, but then you're kind of whittling it down, right? And I'm like, what's the matter? I'm like, I can't type stupid, you know? So, but, you know, it is, and then someone, I mean, like, I've been through university, right? So for people who maybe this is their only thing they're really testing for, it can be difficult. But I think a lot of it has to do with what I've seen with some schools, is they're not giving things that look similar enough as a study guide in terms of like the multiple choice. So they're getting used to the way that it's presented. And I feel like that's the big disconnect, because you can know all day, like in a setting, like, oh, I know I'm supposed to have the garbage can with the has the top on it. I know where I'm supposed to put something that's touched blood, but sometimes when they ask a question, you're like, couldn't that be that? Wait, okay, so what is it that it could not be? And so when you see that over and over, and then you're able to practice and then see where you failed those questions, you can read them. Like, oh, I understand. And so I think a lot of the schools, though, they'll use different kind of study guides that look nothing like the test, that don't read similar to the questions. For me, that I think is the biggest, and having the correct, like, because you can do your practicals and pass those, but you come and do that multiple choice test, it's a totally different animal. And I think it's making sure that they have those correct study guides where they can practice the quizzes. I mean, and then what they're doing is they're going, what is the Quizlet? Everyone's like, go, and like, the guy this is like, this is not what the test is.
But the study guides that come with it, with the books, is not the study guide that goes with the state board.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
So that, I mean, it's.
It's tricky.
Yeah, and what I was gonna say is the study guides that they're actually given after they don't pass
is from you all.
Yes, that is specifically from
And then,
us telling
and
us
then they do
what
like
areas.
and
Yeah,
it's much better. Because I feel like so much of it is not a functional thing, that they don't know the actual information when they're in a practical setting. I think it's many times just the translation of getting it on that multiple choice. And everybody knows that you learn to really take like your SATs and things like that. You sit there and you learn how to read the test. It's not exactly knowing all the information, but it's knowing how to do the test. And I feel like that's the big one, because everyone who's coming in and taking the exam by the time they're HLO, they've already they've passed their practicals, but they already technically know the practical aspect of it. Why is it not translating to the test?
and that's what a lot of people struggle with that is putting hands-on to a question.
Yes.
Because as soon as I read the question most of the time, they're like, oh yeah, I know that answer. Oh yeah, I know that answer. I should know that.
It's just getting used to seeing the patterns, I think, and so having those correct things to take home and just go over.
Yeah, and that's what we give them every time they don't pass. Like, say there's 10 questions in one area.
That comes in.
Oh, sorry. Like, they know how many answers they got wrong in each section. So if they got 0 out of 10 in one section, go home and study that section. And that's what we give them.
I mean, that's what we do inside of the academy. They complain all the time, like, your tests are so hard. I'm like, I am trying to give you what I perceive as these most similar to your state testing. If it seems hard to you, that means there is an area, look, I want you to pass school. I've never had anybody fail school. We get you through. We're here for you to learn. But I need you to understand what you need to know when you go through that. I need you to know where you're lacking so that you can study those concepts and those ideas. So, like, when they get to you, you're like, you missed all 10. On your previous test, right? That's the point. No,
So-
exactly what you did.
So I want to just, this is what kind of consensus. First and second, and take second next day, fail the second time, you come back on the 8th day. You fail that again, you come back on the 8th day, and try to eliminate that 30-day.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also and I saw a lot of nods that it doesn't matter how many times they take the exam.
But it's offered, the study review is then offered after the
At
5th.
the 5th. After the 5th time. They can either go back to school or request a study review.
Yeah.
After the
Will
5th.
we charge for the study review at that point or no?
No.
Because if if they choose to go back to school, they're choosing to take on that financially.
Well,
We don't, I mean, we
Yeah.
don't charge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we have students that have for some reason not passed, then sometimes they have to meet the requirement of doing a study session with either the school or
Oh, okay.
HLO. We don't charge.
Oh, okay.
yeah, I don't know any schools that do. I know that we've had students say that. Do you charge?
Well, I was just gonna, we haven't had anybody come back, but I was going to ask, I mean, when they're required to come back for X number of hours.
You have to fill out the little transcript thing and say how many hours you spent in each particular domain. And it's up to the school.
And then you don't charge them for that.
We don't, because if there are graduates.
Right.
Like if it was somebody coming in from
Different.
from
From
us,
us,
then,
yeah.
we probably also charge them to take this practical exam.
Right.
Right.
Because it's important for us to get a block.
Yeah.
Right.
To pass the test.
Right. Right. Well, it's that balancing thing too, where you're like, I can't afford to have another one in the school for free. If I'm limited on how many I can enroll as well, which is why I was curious.
Okay. I just-
But you're talking, she's driving from Ashland today.
Okay.
How much in gas is it costing her to drive to Ashland and back? And then 7 days later, drive to Ashland and back,
Right.
you know,
The
that,
first 2 times could
the,
be.
yeah, the first time if they could put 24 hours,
Yeah.
they could stay in a motel cheaper than the gas.
Right. Exactly.
Because it went up to $5 if you in Oregon.
Yeah. They could go to Airbnb.
Go for it.
Well, and we advise students to take 1 or 2, if they're taking hair, nails and aesthetics, so take 1 or 2 exams, then they'll take the other the next day.
Yes,
It's a lot.
it's a lot to do.
But we also have some that get done faster and, the time limit, they're done with all 4, because we just have students that are
How they test.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about, and I think that this might be you guys might not agree on, but let's talk about the practical exam. So right now, in order for you to continue to test, you have to take a practical exam after 2 years, if you haven't done that in 2 years. Hopefully, some of this will eliminate that 2 years not passing. I mean, that's what I'm hoping that's gonna do what we just previously talked about. But you test your students through the sophomore, don't you have sophomore practical, then you have a junior practical, then you have senior practical. Do you guys know? When do you have your practical? Only one practical? But
I mean, we have, you know, midterm testing and that kind of stuff, but I mean, practicals are practical.
practical, okay. So, but all the way through, now you guys have doubled the amount of procedures. So you're seeing them, you're having to sign off on every single procedure. So how important is the practical? Just this question.
That's a great question. And I think it can open up a lot of conversation inside of the schools about what qualifies as smart goals. Are you, you know, like, I think it puts a lot more importance, a lot more weight on the actual number of services and the mark offs and things like that. Because it's like, did you complete it? Yes, you completed it, but did you complete it up to the standards of me feeling confident about you moving forward in this profession? That's a whole separate thing. So I'm like, there are times where they may be doing a lot of work on a mannequin versus on a human person. And in those moments during COVID, I felt like practicals were very important, right? But
And I'm not
as
saying they're
much-
bad or good. I'm
Right.
not, I don't have an opinion on that. I just wanted to ask you.
Right.
It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of them having your practical because I like the importance of being rated on these services that you will be performing in your future. I think there's a lot of room for the practical to be more reflective of what the work you're actually doing.
Well, if we compare ourselves with other states, you know, that we are able to administer that practical exam at our school is so much better than having to do it at state board, like the trauma you went through.
So having been a student, it's like the opposite. I actually felt like I got really laser focused at my practical. And then my write, you know, my sign offs were like, literally, it's like a mannequin word, you know, and people, to me, that was the most unhelpful part. Was getting this massive amount of sign offs. But when I really had to really perform on a person while they're staring at me, I mean, the night before I was reading through all the little things, and I was reading through all the little lines, like, oh, I have to do this for the back, I have to do this, I have to do that. And then it was like, oh, now I know. But like, I would feel like I was just kind of like, you know, you're just like, I did my write-offs, now like check mark, check mark. Actually, I feel like it's the inverse. I felt like the practical was the one that got me in gear. The write-offs, the being so numerous, you're just like, literally, when you got to waxing, like, she's letting this wax like per knuckle, 1, 2, 3, 4. It just,
Get them.
and literally, I'm like barely, I mean, honestly, I was barely paying attention. I was like working full time. Right, but when I did the practical, that was the big thing. So I almost feel like there's an inverse, like almost like write-offs being so numerous are almost like a wash.
So I agree too. When you're in school,
Why are you asking this question?
so I'm asking about after they graduated from school.
Right.
And they have to come back. If they have not passed their exams, say somebody went and worked somewhere else and then they're coming back.
But it's not
Not the initial.
It's
Not
not
the
an
initial.
initial, get out of school, graduate.
That was just the start of the conversation. My real focus is on that. After you graduated, you come in, your transcripts are official, they're in our office. What do you think about them having to go back to you after 2 years and sit for another practical? Say they came in and they got licensed and they worked, and then all of a sudden they let their license go for 3 years. And then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden they have to get back into a field that they can practice because restaurants you can work in. So these individuals would have to go take a practical, let's just say in the future, another COVID outbreak or some kind of outbreak happened where these individuals needed work, but guess what? They're expired now. now you have to go back to school, take a practical to research, to test again.
What do you think? Obviously, you have an idea.
I think you can do a couple of things. I think you could extend that 2 years or whatever you want. You can do 5 years, not require practical. Say like it says in these now. It says, if you, if you look at the license slash, you don't need to go to parents. And you have to reapply, you don't need this. Because you've already made it practical.
I just want to voice that you are requiring that if I have not performed a service in 2 years, I have to get training in that service before I can begin to do it again, which I kind of giggle about because, you know, to me, the 2 years lines up, right? You're asking, if, okay, I haven't done it for 2 years. I have to show you that I've got those skills if I do get practical. So,
Well, one is just put a piece of paper in your file. And one is, we'll take it back, I mean, the whole or not.
mhm.
You have a couple options, you could create a dormant license that is something on to say, oh, it's never really wants to go dormant, you can go by age of club. There are these times of type of reactivation, fee, get that back, so we'll be digging with fuels and all this stuff, that's the possibility. You could say, done it once, good, you can say this is 5 years. They still have to test and still have to take their exams.
Yeah, it's like, we're asking people to keep their skills up to even perform a service. And maybe I had a baby and it has been over 5 years since I've done a perm, but I could get up to speed and do a perm. So I just think that's kind of funny to me.
So are you, I guess, are you saying that they should come back and take a practical?
I think that if you have that rule that says I have to do continuing education in order to start doing a service that I did 5 years ago, it seems like that's in alignment, a similar requirement, but yeah, I don't have a dog in a fight, really truthfully.
We're getting the boot.
Oh.
Community engagements. Yeah, but I will say, I think we hit the big topics. Absolutely, exactly. I just wanted to check in with these. Denise, do you want to chime in or Maggie March? You guys just listening?
No, but thank you. I've just been listening. It's to me.
Great, thank you. Okay, then I don't need to close it, but I understand this is gonna be on the web. Cool, thank you. Thank you, guys.
See, that outside, like we do outside testing. Schools that take outside people, and the majority of people that we see are not entering back into the field. They are getting other licenses and they can move out. Yes, that's what we see more than anything. Like I was going to get my ST nails because I'm trying to move to exams.
Yeah.